miss us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcast.
All righty, this is Ian from Ian and Jeff at the AutoHub show, and I'm here in our new interview series. If you haven't checked out the episodes that yet, you should definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe today. Also, if you want one of our brand new AutoHub show hats, you can order it online. Or if you've been on the show in the past or a supporter, just send me your mailing address. I'll send you one out gratis. I'm not making money off the hats. I'm just there to promote the show, but there are costs. All right, so today we have a good friend of the show and a good friend of mine, and one of the hardworking members of the team at LetzChat, and I think it's LETZ for the Canadians chat, Z for the Americans. So maybe you can introduce yourself, Greg, and talk to us a little bit about your background and a little bit what's going on at LetzChat.
Thanks, Ian. A pleasure being on the show. And my name is Greg Iverson, and I'm the VP of LetzChat Automotive. As you said, that's Let's with a Z. And living in Australia, too, I always thought it was interesting that the letter Z was spelled, Z-E-D. So it's as, and actually, I had my first motorcycle down there was a Kawasaki Ninja. And in the early 90s, they didn't market them as Ninjas. They were marketed as ZZRs. So you had, yeah, and I always called it a ZZR. And at that point, they knew I was a Yank. But I'm the vice.
How you going? Wasn't good there? Is that what you mean? How you going?
How you going? Yeah, that was a funny one. How you going, mate? And my response was, I don't know, car, bus, train. But the Aussies are a good bunch. Definitely the lucky country, as they call it. And I worked for Holden down there, so it was a great time I had down there. But yeah, I'm the VP of LetzChat Automotive, which is a subsidiary of LetzChat. We're a translation innovation company, and currently we've got a bunch of different verticals for media. We're website translation, SMS translation, chat translation, video, live on demand, subtitle translation, phone call translation, transcriptions of documents. If you have a translation need, if we don't have it, we can definitely figure one out for you.
Fantastic. And just as a spoiler alert, VidCalls, one of the sponsors of the show, is going to be implementing LetzChat as a partnership deal as part of our version 2, which is imminent launch right now. If you are interested in that feature or LetzChat or have some conversations, obviously happy to set that up. Version 2 is imminent, so we're going to be launching that with our new mobile app, hopefully as soon as next week, but worst case, early next month. So let's get into a little bit more about how you got started with LetzChat and what LetzChat does for, say, car dealers, to pick a random industry.
Yeah, I met the CEO right before COVID in 2020, Jordan Orlick. And Jordan, our CEO, is an avid Corvette fan. He loves Corvettes, had C6, C7, moving on to a C8 soon. And my background is automotive retail. I'm former Tom Stuker trainer. Been in the business probably about 29 years. Started in Australia working for Holden Special Vehicles as a rep, and basically got hijacked by dealers that just said to me, you're going to have more fun selling cars. You'll make more money. We'll give you demos that are worth it. And in 94, I flipped and started selling cars for a group in Sydney called Hunter Holden. And met Tom Stuker down there too. Stuker was one of the top trainers down in Australia. Fast forward about 6 years, got married down there, came back to the States, live in Los Angeles, got a job as an internet director when internet was just getting big in 99, and North Hollywood Toyota. And from there, ran big stores, Keys Toyota in Los Angeles, Norm Reeves Honda in Cerritos, the world's biggest Honda store, CarPro's Kia in Los Angeles. So my background in automotive retail is internet marketing, internet sales management, and meeting Jordan. It was funny. When the C8s were coming out, you were doing preference orders through General Motors, ordering your car. And it was kind of a harsh thing in a way that they wouldn't let you have certain combinations. Jordan loves the torch yellow. And one of my sales guys came out and said, I got this guy out here. He's, a computer programmer, kind of a pain, wants to order this car. The system's not taking it. Can you come out and talk to him? So went out and just basically explained that, the initial orders were going to have to be kind of, boring in a sense, black exterior, black interior, white exterior, black interior, and, yellow with, like an orange or red interior is not going to go through. And at that point, we just struck up a conversation, seeing that he lived about 50 miles away from the store. And I was like, you traveled 50 miles to do this? I mean, there's a bunch of Chevy stores in between Calabasas and downtown LA. And he goes, no, I do some work for the NFL. And at that point, I asked him, obviously, what are you doing? He goes, oh, we do video subtitle translation for their overseas streaming service, Game Pass, which I was familiar with. And he explained it to me, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. What else do you do? And he goes, well, the thing that we just finalized is website translation. And that for me was really the moment that I, started listening to the conversation more and
Right.
asking him about how it worked. We had just went through implementing Google Translate to our 8 dealerships downtown. And downtown Los Angeles is multicultural. You've got the biggest Korean population in California, obviously Hispanic, but you've got a huge Central American with a different dialect. You've got German, you've got French. I mean, it is the melting pot. And we had to pull all of the website, Google Translate off all the websites within a month or two. And surprisingly enough, I knew that the accuracy rates were in the 80s, but every GM kind of told me the same thing. Greg, the customers are insulted. And I was like, insulted? I mean, we're attempting to communicate to them in their language, which we obviously can't. I would assume, it would be something else. And he goes, no, their opinion was, if you're going to try to do it, at least do it right. And Jordan had explained to me that, he had his own library. His accuracy rates were in the low 90s. There were no drop downs. He had a patent on device detection, which at the time I thought was maybe not a great idea because everyone's using drop downs. But as he explained it, if somebody speaks another language, they're going to have their smartphone, their tablet, or their computer set to that language initially when they boot it up, because that's the language they work in. And COVID hit. We had lunch about 2 months later. It was probably May of 2020. We were in a restaurant where we had to sit outside, and all the restrictions of COVID in California were pretty strict. And we pretty much put a game plan together that we were going to start reaching out to vendors. And I felt, which pretty much what happened was, everyone was hunkering down, riding out the storm, not sure when we were going to come out of this. And basically, that's what happened for about a year. We set up about 10 or 15 meetings with large companies. In the beginning of 2022, we started to go into some tentative pilots, and here we are today. We've finalized agreement with Dealer Inspire. So we're going to be partnered with Dealer Inspire as a reseller, in a sense, where they're going to provide translation to their dealerships. We're currently on Longo Toyota's website, which is the biggest dealership in the world. And we've probably got about 25 other dealerships nationwide that are using our translation tool. And recently, we've been in talks. I can't really discuss it because of NDAs, but we're in talks with 4 major OEMs regarding translating their tier 1 and tier 2 websites.
Well done. I mean, it's kind of ironic. So I was born in Kingston, grew up in Toronto, spent 10 years in the US, but my first job in retail was working for a Honda store, and I managed their internet department shortly after that. And it was funny at the time, and this was after the early days of the internet, because I think I started in retail around 2000, probably similar time frame to you. I actually had a website design company in Maryland in 1997, which people told me the Yellow Pages was the future, which was kind of funny. But, I worked in a market in Greater Vancouver when I lived in Vancouver that was 60 to 70% Asian of every type. There was also obviously Punjabi and other languages. But the thing that was interesting that you brought up on the language side is we actually were about 99% done working with the dealer in the Quebec market, where they actually have language police. And the challenge there is everything has to be perfect.
Right.
Like, they will get fined. Like, it's a little bit nuts. And actually, the dealer who owns a number of dealers there, including a subprime dealership group, he speaks English and French, and he's a little irritated. But he says at the same time, a large percent of my customers are French, and I can't afford the fines. And ironically, his head of IT speaks English, French, and Italian. Which is kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, he's very excited about LetzChat, as are we at VidCalls. because it solves a lot of problems. But when you look at big markets, let's say Toronto, Vancouver, New York, Chicago, LA, I'm assuming Miami or Orlando has a big Hispanic, or in Texas. What are the dealers that are using it to translate their website learning about their market in terms of demographics?
Yeah, that's a great question. The one thing that we used as a base is LetzChat was actually involved in the 2020 census here in America, and the one thing that came out of it was that 23% of the country, close to 78 million people, are speaking another language at home. That is their first language. And, that was what kind of spurred us on with the automotive side of things, having my experience being in dealerships. Dealerships are really good at reacting to situations. I was when I was at Norm Reeves Honda, we had Cambodian customers that barely spoke English. They had a family member that spoke English that could not be there that day. And we ended up grabbing one of our techs from the service department who was Cambodian, and he came out and helped us work a deal. So, those things are great. It's great to see dealerships figuring out problems, but, the idea that, and through our pilots, it's either, depending on the area, 10 to 20% of your traffic is hitting your site in another language, meaning that their device is set to another language, meaning that that's the language they speak primarily. You're paying for this traffic. The numbers are there. 80% of consumers want to work on a website providing content and products in their language. What the dealers are, it's a number of things. When we set up the stores, it's interesting. We always kind of do a quick kind of like questionnaire of what do you think your top 3 languages are, and pretty much all of them get one of it right, and generally it's Spanish. Yeah, Spanish is kind of a no-brainer across the U.S., but we did a store in Biloxi, Mississippi, a BMW store, part of a bigger group, and they said the same thing. They thought Spanish was going to be number 1. It was actually Vietnamese, and Spanish was number 2, and number 3 was French Creole. So it's and the cool thing, other than you can talk about DEI. We want diversity, we want equity, and we want inclusion. Where that path takes you, on certain businesses, I think is relevant. Maybe not for airline pilots. I want people that have a lot of flight hours, is probably the first requirement. But what we're finding is that dealerships are taking this data and then expanding out in their PMA. So we have a dealership in North Miami Toyota, actually, and Spanish obviously was number 1. 3 different dialects: Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Venezuelan were the top 3. The number 4 language was Russian, which wasn't a big surprise for South Florida. It was surprising to see it that high for the general manager. So what he's done, he has a few Russian salespeople. He started reaching out into the Russian newspapers. There's a few magazines there, getting on radio. We have stores in LA doing the same thing with Vietnamese and Filipino markets too, where not only are you translating your content and creating more leads, ultimately that's the goal of your website. I want more service leads, I want more parts leads, and I definitely want more sales leads, is that you're getting this data that's letting you reach out into these communities that are near you, that are shopping you, and you're just building bridges.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I spent some time during the end of my MBA going to Japan and to China as part of a project. And what was interesting in those 2 markets was, in Tokyo, they didn't speak English very well, but they weren't comfortable enough. Or they spoke English, but they weren't comfortable enough with English to talk to you. Right. So they would ignore you, even though there's apps available on phones that do that, even back then. But in China, they were very big on using the app. They were happy to do that, which is kind of interesting. But more importantly, I think as you look at translation, and as that becomes more and more part of how we do business and how we communicate, I think those barriers of language will disappear. Because when you're looking at, say, for example, Italy or Spain or Brazil is a big country, obviously, with a lot of population, and Mexico, obviously, and Canada, obviously, being smaller. But when you look at these, the influx of people from different cultures, obviously, they prefer to speak in their own language. When I worked at this store, I used to work a lot with a gentleman from Pakistan who spoke multiple dialects. And I would always get at loggerheads with customers because they'd have a conversation with their family, And then they'd have a conversation with me. And I eventually got to the point, usually in the negotiation, where it was like I didn't understand what was going on and I couldn't solve for it. So I would always sort of tap out and bring him in to help me. But if I could speak their language or have that conversation, that would be a game changer, because it would eliminate that sub conversation, but more importantly, it would make it more comfortable for them. And I would use the same when I dealt with people from mainland China, from Hong Kong, or people from, say Vietnam or Korea. They would prefer to speak to someone who spoke their language, even if that person wasn't from their culture. And I think there's a famous YouTube video. It's a gentleman, he speaks Chinese, and he's actually in a Chinese food restaurant, I think in LA. And he starts ordering in Chinese, and the people there are like confused. They think it's some sort of trick.
Oh yeah.
He speaks it so well. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've seen that guy. He actually does a lot of it in New York City too, in Chinatown, and he lived in China and speaks Mandarin and Cantonese. But yeah, it's especially the Asian languages. When you see, a Caucasian guy speaking Chinese, and it's a tough language. I lived in Hong Kong for close to a year, and there's a lot of English spoken there historically. With English being there, that you get kind of a version of Spanglish in a way, but it's Changlish, where half of it's Chinese Cantonese and half of it's English. But yeah, it's ultimately about bringing people together. I mean, that's what you do, and speed gives you power, no matter what you're doing. I mean, if you get stymied in the middle of a deal because you're basically trying to figure out how to communicate with somebody, that doesn't help the process. So there's a number of things that this does. The translation, at least on the websites, and I think the SMS also, is providing content in their language. It makes it easy for them. You want to make the process easy. It makes them more, susceptible to come into that dealership and communicate with that store. And, once again, if you can cut out a half hour or 45 minutes or an hour in the process of trying to figure out, how to get a car or how to service a car, you're going to be more effective and more successful. And ultimately, Jordan, our CEO, literally is a Boy Scout. I mean, he's traveled the world with the Boy Scouts, had a career with them in his early 20s. It's great to see, people that have these kind of like, stigmatisms and just kind of, apprehension about moving forward, which I think everybody can relate with, is like, I don't understand what they're saying. What did he say? I mean, what does that mean? If you can knock that out, which we're doing in a lot of ways, it just makes life a lot easier.
Oh, understand. I mean, I remember years ago, I negotiated with a blind couple, or no, not blind, deaf couple on a car deal. And it was all on paper. It was like paper, and then talk to them, and then they take back and this and that. Right. But the thing that was really interesting wasn't the car deal, even though that was kind of interesting. It took to slow it way down. Like it took what negotiation that you normally would take, say, half an hour, 45, took 3 hours, because it was this constant back and forth. But the thing that was really interesting where I lived at the time was that you had to hire an interpreter for the business office. So they had to actually hire someone who signed to make sure that they understood what was going on. And I didn't know that we had to pay for that, which was kind of interesting. But what was interesting to take that forward to China. So I was in China. I was with a friend of mine, and he was trying to buy these shoes from a retailer. And they had these shoes where the bottom of the shoes are a sole, and then the tops, there's a zipper around the outside, and you can change the tops. So you could buy like 20 different tops for the same pair of soles. And then that way you didn't have 20 pairs of shoes when you're traveling. You just had whatever. So he's tried to negotiate with these ladies, and we're using this app to try and translate. And then it was funny because what happened was one of the ladies who was trying to sell it was like, well, I know someone who speaks English. So she's pulling out her phone, and she's having this person, she's speaking to him in Chinese, and then he's speaking in English to my buddy, and they're having this negotiation. And it was just outside of the box thinking. But with, obviously products like LetzChat, you don't need that. You can basically have that conversation, whether that's over video or text or on a website. So I guess my big question is, what's the most creative use that you've seen so far, whether it be in automotive or elsewhere? I mean, where are dealers thinking outside the box with it?
Yeah, with the website, for me, it's kind of a set it and forget it type of tool in a sense, because, I've got 25 years plus in huge dealerships, and you've got so many things you're looking at. Your website obviously is, for me, I refer to it as the jersey on the player. It's the first thing that people are going to see. It doesn't necessarily make the player. You want to make sure that the player's got skills, but the creative thing from the website that we've seen is, them stretching out into these ethnic markets and attending, events and, bringing cars out to, certain events and meeting the community. The neat thing for me, and I think every company that has different tools, you always have a favorite one. We're currently partnered with Podium too. So we have an API that actually does SMS translation. So
Wow. Cool.
yeah, so for me, that's really cool. It's a simple API. If you're a Podium user, you can go to their marketplace on their website and you'll see LetzChat there. I think we're selling it at $9.99 a month, but we've got healthcare. We've got a company on the East Coast that provides rides for senior citizens and people with disabilities to go to the doctor, to go shopping. And a lot of it is, ethnics that can't really communicate in English. And to see that, for something, what I would say is noble, people that really need help, that obviously don't have family members there to help them. The company's called Caregivers of America.
Right.
Have them be able to text in Spanish or Mandarin, hey, I need to go to the supermarket, or I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday. And then the business office that's kind of coordinating all these things, which is pretty complicated. I mean, it's not just the rides, it's making sure that, their insurance is set up, and, it's a little bit complicated. To see them go back and forth and the problems that it's solving on both ends, I think is probably the coolest thing that Jordan and I have seen. Is just, it warms your heart, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you look at immigrant population coming to a city where maybe they know nobody, they need help, whether it be roadside assistance for a car or whether it be just going to the grocery store or trying to figure out a pharmacy. I mean, I had that challenge when I was trying to buy aspirin in Japan. You can't buy at convenience stores. You got to go to a pharmacy. But I went to a pharmacy and the pharmacist didn't want to talk to me because I didn't speak Japanese. So I tried to use this app and he's like, well, no, I'm not doing that. I'm like, so how do I buy this, dude?
Right.
It was kind of like, it was interesting. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, as you look at international travel or international populations, and we know there's a big influx. I mean, I know in the Canadian market, we've imported over 1 million people this year. So there's been a lot of growth. So that's, interesting for sure.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot of population for a country that we used to be less than 40 million. We're over 40 now. But, when you look at that, let's just say an influx in a city of 80,000 people a year from different countries. That's a huge amount of people. And then they may not be familiar, right? So that deal, it's an opportunity, or that bank or insurance company or pharmacy or medical practitioner. I guess my other question is, where do you see translation going in the next 5 years? Like, how do you see that changing how people interface? Like, where do you see that going?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's kind of gone from, and we, like any new business, we've had our struggles and we've had to push. And, Jordan and I have had endless conversations early in the morning, late at night, for the past few years. And I think one of the things is that, it was such a thing, at least here in the States, because it is so multicultural. I mean, to backstep a little bit, most of the websites we're providing translation for are picking up 45 to 47 different languages. I mean, Longo Toyota is picking up 91, 88, 89, 90 different languages. So you get a real idea of how diverse these cities are. I mean, you wouldn't think that there's a huge Turkish population in Los Angeles, and there's a relatively big one. But I think it's went from at least in the automotive industry, is where there really was nothing there to do translation. Google Translate came out, and in a lot of ways, I think it was a dud. I mean, they don't support it, not Google, but it's one of these things. And we know people at Google, unless it's going to make them $250 million a year, it's something that they're not going to delve into, and they really don't even support it. And it was only on Chrome. So I think it's went from, we just have to figure out how to do business, guys and gals. If we don't have translation tools, we've done well without it. We can survive without it. And we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to keep more focused on other things. Now, I think with our tool, and the one step that we've really made with LetzChat is in the sporting world. So Comcast is a shareholder of LetzChat, and we're in a perpetual kind of partnership with them. It's basically called sports tech. So there's a whole wave of sports technology that's hit in the past 3 or 4 years where we're doing stuff for the NFL and for PGA golf and for the Olympics actually in Paris next year, that it just brings people together. And there is, a great feeling and a monetization of that. In automotive now, I think what's happening is that with our product, people are realizing that, hey, there is a solution now. It helps me solve problems that I've had in the past that I've been able to deal with in a certain respect, maybe not as effectively as I could, but now the solution. I mean, to give you an idea, we're moving into different areas in automotive other than websites and SMS. Is we have phone call translation. So in September of last year, we met with one of the top 10 independent groups, family-owned groups. They've got close to 100 dealerships, and they have centralized service BDCs for the stores. There's about 6 of them, and they have problems with translation all the time, and they're trying to staff around it. So we've got a pretty simple webhook that goes into a phone system, and you can set it up auto detect, or you can have specific numbers they would dial, or you can have a auto attendant kind of promote that. Press 1 for Spanish, press 2 for Chinese. That the conversation is pretty much in real time where I can talk in Chinese, the BDC rep is going to hear it in English, speak back in English, and it's going to be pushed back in Chinese. So for me, that's kind of our next biggest, step as far as LetzChat. And exciting too, some OEMs are interested for roadside assistance, which I think is great, and also customer support lines.
Well, what about someone who, say, owns a big U.S. dealer group who's expanding, say, for example, in the U.K. or expanding into Australia, New Zealand, or looking at properties, say, in France? I mean, could they use this technology across the board?
By all means. The way our APIs work and our systems work is, and we're talking to a company, a huge automotive company that deals in 60 different countries, kind of cradle to grave car ownership. They've got business in Germany, and there's kind of a high Arabic language there. Also, other European nations that we could have it set to where, the dealership mainly speaks German, and they're dealing with these other languages, and it's a fluid conversation. So it's not just English to all 100 languages that we support. It can be from German to French, from French to Portuguese, and it's just a matter of settings in the API.
Yeah, I have actually a very good friend who's from the Middle East, spent a lot of time training at the OEM level. I should introduce you to. Anyway, it looks like we're kind of out of time. Did you have any other final thoughts? Any learnings? Any final thoughts on the future of translation in automotive or elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. Being in the industry 30 years and pretty much on a retail level, at least in 2 continents, dealerships, the one thing, there's many things I loved about it. The cars initially got me into it. I love cars, always have. I'm a people person, love dealing with people, helping them solve problems. But the thing that I really liked about working within the dealership was, there's this attitude of constant improvement. There's an attitude of how do we get better? How do we learn from our mistakes and move forward, which I think is a great life attitude for somebody to have with oneself. But, this is a type of thing where I think it's an area, depending on dealerships, that 10 to 20% of your consumers have had problems trying to figure out how to do business with you. And it's a type of thing that I think it's a set it and forget it type of problem once we start solving these, like with website and SMS and telephone calls, that once you have these systems in place and that every single customer that reaches out to your dealership reaches somebody that can speak their language through our technology, your numbers are going to go up, your consumer satisfaction is going to go up, employee satisfaction is going to go up, just like you having to grab the Pakistani guy and split a deal. I don't have to turn deals or turn customers because I'm trying to, support the company and do what's best, which you should. I think there'll be a point where it's just going to be commonplace. And I'm thinking it's going to be within 5 years. And then there'll be new problems that we, have to address. But it's exciting.
100%. Well, thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. And if you wanted to be interviewed on the one-on-one interview show, you can definitely check out the link on our website, or you can reach out to the AutoHub show. And of course, special thanks to LetzChat for all the chat learnings and the translation learnings. If you are in a market where you have other populations that speak something other than your native language, or you're not aware of that, it's definitely something to look at. We'll be connecting and talking more about LetzChat as we launch version 2. And we may also do a show around, maybe I'm thinking like the Tower of Babel. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like the Tower of Babel kind of show. Like, yeah, this was a problem however long ago it was created. We can fix this with technology. But more importantly, and I was talking to a dealer I know in the Greater Vancouver market doing a bunch of rooftops, pretty forward-thinking General Motors dealer. They own other franchises. And I said, well, you're in Greater Vancouver. You don't even know who your core market is. So how can you effectively market? I know the marketing director quite well. And he's like, well, that's interesting, but I think we know our market. But to your point, yeah, maybe he doesn't. But people don't know what they don't know till they know, and that's an opportunity. Thanks very much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to showing you version 2 soon. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ian. Have a great day.
Hey, if you missed us live, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts.